Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the Recovery Plug. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's doing good today. I know my day is going pretty good. Before we get this video podcast started, if you would please join me for a moment of silence, followed by a serenity prayer for the addict who still suffers and for those of us who are still in the struggle. So if you would please, moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Alrighty, well, let's get started. How's it going, everybody? How y'all doing, man? I'm doing pretty good today, man. Today's, gosh, it's been busy. I got up early today. I had a peer support group to attend today over at the VA, and you know, I love going to that peer support group. It's like it's a good motivator. You know what I mean? And you know, I can remember when I first started going to that peer support group. Gosh, it's been a little bit now, but I remember the first couple of times that I was there. Man, I was kind of you know, it was a fearful thing. You know, to be in a room with people that you don't know, and then, you know, having to open up a little bit, if you will, kind of letting that curtain down and expressing some feelings and that sort of thing, and just sharing with strangers. You know what I'm saying? That's a tough thing to do. You know what I mean? It is. It's a pretty, you know, it's fearful sometimes. It's intimidating. You know, so it quite a few different emotions that you go through when you do something like that. But, you know, nonetheless, doing it more and more, it seems that it started getting easier and easier. You know what I mean? I started getting in, you know, you feel yourself getting, you know, you feel yourself kind of like sitting in a chair like this. You know, you start getting comfortable. You know what I mean? And it's great. You know what I'm saying? It's great. It's great to interact like that. It's healthy. You know what I mean? It's healthy and to do new things and get out of that box. And you know, I wanted to just, I guess, share something with you guys. Something that I read earlier today, and I figured it would be kind of. I guess I can just go with that topic, I guess, and since you know, it reminded me kind of the same type of thing that I've shared and heard stories at the peer support group today, and you know, the meditation that I read this morning was one that I got out of the daily meditation, the DNA daily meditation, and it's called God Does For Us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it, and then we'll elaborate on it a little bit and kind of go, you know, kind of talk about it. And I'll talk about it, how it reminds me of things that are going on in my life and in my recovery with the peer support group and in my life in general, right? But just to get things cleared up here, you know, in my no way, shape, or form affiliated with an NA or AA or any of the 12-step, you know, programs. I just like to read into these things because it's part of what I do in my daily life. You know what I mean? I research and I take little bits, pieces of different, you know, programs and different people and you know, it's just how I work my recovery. You know what I mean? So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there so we can, you know, I don't want to know when to, you know, get upset or whatever. You know what I mean? I just want to make that clear of how I do my recovery and what kind of things I use and put into practice in my life. And this is one of them. So one of many. So I'm going to go ahead and read this thing, and it says ongoing recovery is dependent on our relationship with a loving God who cares for us and will do for us what we find impossible to do for ourselves. It says the base tape has 99. It says, how often have we heard it said in meetings that God does for us what we cannot do for ourselves? At times, we may get stuck in our recovery, unable, afraid, or unwilling to make the decision we know we must make to move forward. Perhaps we are unable to end a relationship that just isn't working. Maybe our job has become a source of too much conflict. Or perhaps we feel we need to find a new sponsor, but are afraid to begin the search. Through the grace of our higher power, unexpected change may occur in precisely the area we felt unable to alter. Sometimes we sometimes allow ourselves to become stuck in the problem instead of moving forward toward the solution. At these times, we often find that our higher power does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Perhaps our partner decides to end our relationship. We may get fired or laid off, or our sponsor tells us that he or she can no longer work with us, forcing us to look for a new one. Sometimes what occurs in our lives can be frightening, as change often seems. But we also hear that God never closes a door without opening another one. As we move forward with faith, the strength of our higher power is never far from us. Our recovery is strengthened by these changes. Just for today, I trust that God of my understanding will do for me what I cannot do for myself. And man, that's it. So when I was in peer support group earlier today, I shared something that I'll share with you guys. Again, I believe I might have shared this in one of my videos, in one of my recent videos, but I shared with them that, this past week, I had this feeling of just being so sad, you know what I mean? And it stemmed from a test that I took. You know what I mean? I'm currently going to school and for cybersecurity type stuff, and I failed the test, right? Which was no big deal, because I got to take it over and passed it. But at that immediate time, at that immediate moment in time, it made me, I was sad about it. You know what I mean? And I remember getting home that day, and I just felt so hurt, so sad that I didn't pass, that it just opened up this feeling inside of me that allowed me to just think about all these sad things that I had gone through in my life. You know what I mean? And it was just so annoying to me or just weird that I couldn't stop the feeling from happening. You know what I mean? It just these thoughts just kept coming out. I mean, I'm talking thoughts of things that had made me sad when I was a child to, moving forward up to adulthood and things that I hadn't thought about in like forever, you know what I mean? That I had just forgotten and just put back in that, I don't want to remember closet of my mind, and they came out into the surface the other night. And I'm sitting there in my room just, feeling this just overwhelming energy of sadness. And during that time, the first thing that came into my mind just to stop the feeling was to pick up a book and start reading it. And reciting a couple of prayers, a couple of meditation, mantra chanting, or whatever I did. I did quite a few things like that until it finally went away, until I finally fell asleep. And I dwelled on it the next couple of days. You know what I mean? Up until now, obviously, that I was just like wondering. I was like, wow, I changed a whole lot. It was one of those aha moments, kind of like one of those moments where I looked at myself in a sense. It's like, wow, dude, you've come a long way. Kind of one of those. It's okay to pat yourself in the back every now and then type things. And I was like, wow, I was actually excited about how I started feeling about it, because I realized that I dealt with something that I had dealt with my entire life in a different way. I've dealt with sadness quite a few, more than a dozen times in my lifetime. You know what I mean? And most of the time, I could, as far back as I could remember, when that feeling of sadness prompted up into my head, my go-to to mask that sadness, if I didn't want to feel sad anymore, my go-to thing by default was to go use drugs. Use drugs because drugs and alcohol don't let me feel what I'm feeling. And, to not be able to, not that it's not be able to, but to not do that and to recognize that, to see that I decided at that moment in time to pick up a book instead, read an encouraging story, recite some prayers, do a little meditation, and ultimately got a good night's rest, right? And had I felt that same feeling of sadness 2 years ago, I know exactly what I would have been doing. I would have been somewhere on the street, somewhere in a motel, and using. That's what I would have done. I would have went and picked up some drugs if I didn't already have it on me, and I would have smoked. My DOC was meth, and I would have smoked that. You know what I mean? And that's how I would have medicated myself to not feel those feelings. But to be able to recognize the fact that I could do something else that's positive, and move past that feeling. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, just like the thing that I read a while ago about letting God, letting my higher power take care of the things, I had to do that. You know what I mean? I had to do that. I had to finally say, you know what? Do something for me, because I can no longer deal with none of these feelings, whether it's sadness, whether it's depression, whether it's thinking suicidal thoughts, whether it's dealing with childhood traumatic experiences, whether it's dealing with PTSD, whatever it is that I was dealing with in my life, and really having no control over how I dealt with it, because for me, that was my default. any of these types of feelings, first thing I'm going to do is go use. And that's just how it was. And, you know, I know sometimes people might say that, well, why don't you just say no? Why don't you just not do it? You know, it's easier said than done, because when you have these neurological brain disorders, it's not something that you really have control over. You know what I'm saying? And it's a disease, you know what I mean? It's a disease. They're neurological brain disorders, and it's a disease, and a disease that I've been dealing with my whole life, since I was in the first grade. You know what I mean? And, you know, at an early age, I decided that I knew that if I did consume these types of things into my body, I wouldn't feel those things. And for me to be up at night the other night, and a small thing is not passing a test, getting my mind and my feelings, that means that I let this thing into my subconscious mind, and in turn there I felt this emotion, in turn there I had some actions because of that emotion. But because I understand now that I have the free will to pick and choose what those actions are, it allowed me to come back into myself, focus into my energies to myself, and bring myself back, so that I wouldn't just let my mind keep rolling, and in turn they're giving me these negative thoughts and these other types of mentalities, negative mentalities, that I would have had a different outcome as far as my actions then, you know. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that today. You know what I mean? I'm grateful that I was able to channel that energy in a different way, because it could have easily been a different outcome. I could have easily just walked out of my apartment and just went and used. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have took long for me to get to where I needed to go to smoke some of them drugs, and I don't even have to pay for it. You know what I mean? That's how easy it would have been for me to walk out, and as long as I got to that destination, I would have been good. But ultimately, because I've been doing things on a repetitive basis that are positive, and it allowed me to not let my default be the default of the old me, the negative me, the me that didn't want to deal with the problems, didn't want to deal with the emotions. And I deal with them now in a different way. And one of the ways is by allowing my higher power, allowing myself to know that I don't have to deal with that. That it's okay to let go. It's okay to allow other things to come into your life to help you out. You're not in this alone. You know what I mean? Even though sometimes it seems like that, you know, I know that that I'm not by myself. I know that I have people, communities that I can reach out to, books that I can pick up, a podcast that I could watch, something that's encouraging that can just maneuver me back into that straight line of positive energy where I need to be, you know what I mean? And not, you know, derail myself, if you will. But letting go and letting God, that's for sure. You know, one thing that I have done in this time around of my recovery, you know, because I haven't always been sober, you know what I mean? My last, you know, relapse, it lasted for 5 years, and That's a long time to be relapsed and be bound down to an addiction. And I'm just grateful by the grace of God that I was able to let go and let God of my understanding. You know what I mean? Letting go and letting God of your understanding could be totally different from you than it is from me. But what I do know is that when you do let go and let God of your understanding, life seems to be a little bit better than it is when you're in that negative realm. And it's been a journey, that's for sure. And I'm glad that it's an ongoing one, because ultimately this is a lifestyle. It's not something that you can just do one time and think that you're just going to be A-okay, especially not with brain disorders like I got. You know, I got quite a few that I deal with. And, you know, I just always like to make it a point to share that, you know, you're not here doing it alone, you know, and there's people like myself, you know, and people that and there's groups that you can go to. I'm sure there's groups in your area, wherever you may live, you know what I mean? You just gotta take the initiative to reach out and look for them. And just know that when you do, man, these types of communities are communities of people who have that drive, who have that burning desire to want to help somebody, to want to love somebody, to want to be there and be that, you know, stronghold for you. You know what I mean? To help you out and not keep you bound down. You know what I mean? It's just a beautiful thing to have resources like that and know that they're there in your community just like they are in mine. And you can do anything as simple as watch a video podcast just to get you to that next step. Sometimes that's all it takes. And I know for myself, just like the other night when I was just feeling like that, just so dreadful and sad, and you know, all I had to do was pick up a book and read this encouraging story. You know, it was just a few pages long, but it was a story that just really resonated with me, and it was what I needed to hear at that particular moment in time to, you know, not feel as sad and to get some good rest and to talk about it. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, when you talk about your emotion state, even if it's just making a video, you know what I mean, and saying and talking about it, you know, I can talk about stuff because nobody's here except for me. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think that sharing my story will help somebody out. But at the same time, it's harder for me to share the story if I'm if I go to a meeting that where I don't know nobody. Like if I just go to a random AA meeting or a random NA meeting, you know, I don't know anybody, and it's harder for me to share a story there. But, you know, the more you go, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And that's just how our human body and brain and mentality, that's how it's made. And that's how you change, is by doing things on a repetitive basis. When you keep doing it every single day, you get good at it. You know, it's just like going to work. You know what I mean? I'm sure wherever you work, whatever job you have, when you first started that job, when you first got into that field, you didn't know too much about what was going on there. You know what I mean? Maybe you were a painter, or you know, maybe if you're a painter, you didn't know how that, you know, moving the brush a certain way or rolling the roller a certain way is going to give you a better looking texture than, you know, just going every which way. You know what I mean? You learn new things like that. And the more you do it on a repetitive basis, the better you get at it. You know what I mean? And it's the same way with recovery and spirituality. The more you engage in it, the more you do things that pertain to it, the easier it becomes. You know what I mean? You start being this, you know, this master apprentice, if you will, at being sober, at being a spiritual person, at being a person that helps somebody, being a spiritual healer or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I mean, the only way to cure yourself or better your life or, you know, do away with these negative feelings is by doing something positive, and by doing something positive and spiritual on a consistent basis. You know what I mean? It's not going to work if you're only doing it once a month. Yeah, it still keeps you engaged, but if the odds are that you're going to be stuck in this negative realm if you're there for 29 days rather than and just in the positive just one day. Now, if you're doing positive things every single day, you know, and I know this to be true because I've done it for the last year and a half. For the last year and a half, man, I've been meditating every day. I've been reading every day. I've been chanting Om mantras and meditating mantras every day. I've been chanting prayers every day. I've been exercising every day. You know what I mean? I'm doing these things on a repetitive basis every single day. When I first started doing this video podcast, I didn't know how to do it. And I was uncomfortable doing it. But I know that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do it. I just didn't know how. But I've been doing it. And it's, to me, I feel like it's getting easier for me to do it. It's easier for me to talk about things because I've been doing it now, you know, for a little while. And I hope to get better at it. You know, I don't know how good, or I don't critique myself, but I know that I feel much better about it. I feel more just, I can, you know, I can share things freely and genuinely, you know, that I share the stories that I share because I care about my sobriety. I care about my recovery journey, my spirituality, and this helps. That I know if I help, that if somebody hears my message, that if they leave me a comment, and they say that, you know, when somebody leaves me a comment and says that, oh, that your video podcast really inspired me or helped me or whatever, you know, thanks, and gives me a thumbs up, it's encouraging for me because I know that I'm reaching out to somebody that I have no idea. I don't know where they are or where, you know, who they are or anything. But it feels good to know that some of my stories are helping somebody somewhere. You know what I mean? And that's because I feel a passion that that's what I want to do. And I know that if I keep doing it, I'll ultimately be helping somebody out. And because ultimately I know that I heard somebody's story one time that moved me forward to, you know, live a life of sobriety and spirituality. And I'm grateful for that. I really am. Yeah, so I just wanted to, you know, share that with you guys today, you know, and share a little bit of my journey, and hopefully it's encouraging for somebody out there. So I guess at this time, man, if you would please give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, tap that subscribe button, and share my channel. And just know that when you do tap that subscribe button, it doesn't cost you a thing, but just know that when you do that and you share my channel, you'll be helping out another veteran, another person dealing with homelessness, another person dealing with PTSDs, another person dealing with childhood traumatic experiences, another person dealing with anger, with suicidal thoughts, with sadness and depression, because I, my friends, have dealt with all of those things at one point in time in my life. And by hearing somebody's story was enough to move me forward, to give me that nudge to move forward into this world of positivity, spirituality, and recovery. So that's what I hope to share here today. And I guess until the next time, when the smoke clears, I am the Recovery Plug.